Thank you very much for coming today and welcome to the Washington State Attorney General Candidates Forum, featuring our Attorney General candidates Nick Brown and Pete Serrano. In the interest of time, because I know that you all are excited to hear from these two, we're going to jump right in and get started. Today we have our moderators from the oldest, the baddest civil rights organization, the NBCF State Area President, Ms. Shalee Seacrest. Attorney at law and a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Mr. Craig Simmons. I will now turn it over to our moderators.
Hello, hello. All right, so first let's just talk about the rules of the game. Each of you will have a 3-minute opening. That's 90 seconds thereafter for each question. And then to end it, we're going to have a 90-second close. Everyone understand the rules? Audience, do you guys understand the rules? All right. And so then, without further ado, let's just jump into the first question. First one, how do you see the Attorney General's role?
Opening.
Do you want us to
Oh, the opening. I thought Craig was just holding my hand trying to give me comfort. No, he was stopping me because we actually have to do the opening statements. Okay, so we've got a timer, and please, your 90 seconds begin, starting with Nick Brown.
Well, it's a 3-minute opening. And so feel free to present yourself as you wish to this audience before we begin the questionings. The timer is going to be right there in the front corner, so please pay attention to the time frame. And before the event started, it was determined that Candidate Brown will go first in presenting the opening statement. Candidate Brown, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'll stand for the opening. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for everyone who's coming here today, and thank you for everyone who's watching at home or wherever they're online. My name is Nick Brown. I grew up in Washington State. I grew up in Pierce County, Washington. Both of my parents were military veterans and public servants. They met back in the 60s at Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital, where my father was a young lieutenant on the staff and my mother was a nurse. My father grew up in Columbia, South Carolina during the height of the civil rights movement, found his way and his career through the Army. And my mother was from Independence, Missouri, and also found her career through the Army. And I always credit my parents with instilling in me a desire to be engaged in the community, to give a damn about what was happening in my community and the people in it, and to do everything that I could to try to make a difference in my community. And it's because of them, because of that foundation, that I'm here advocating to all of you and to everyone in Washington to hire me as the next Attorney General for the great state of Washington. I followed my parents' lead into the Army. I went off to Morehouse College on an Army ROTC scholarship, and then to law school at Harvard, and started my legal career as an Army JAG lawyer, serving on active duty in the Army, helping soldiers and families all over the world, all over the country, including a deployment to Iraq during the height of the Iraqi war. I did family law, consumer protection work, but spent most of my time as a criminal lawyer, defending soldiers and prosecuting soldiers. Finished up my time at Fort Lewis, and then joined the Department of Justice, where I served for about 6 years doing complex criminal litigation, fraud cases, and violent crime. And then was hired by Governor Inslee to be his general counsel, to be the chief legal advisor for the governor, working very closely with A.G. Ferguson and his team, and handling a myriad of complicated issues affecting all of us in Washington. I did some time in private practice doing complex civil litigation before I was appointed by President Biden to become the United States Attorney for Western Washington, the first black person in Washington state history to ever have that job, where I led a large public law firm. And I loved that job, but I decided to run for Attorney General because this job really matters. It impacts all of our lives in ways that we see and ways that we don't see. And I'm committed to doing everything I can to keep this community safe, to defend your rights, and to be an advocate for everyone in the state of Washington, and to make sure that we have the best possible legal office in the entire state. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to the questions. And thank you again to everyone here, to New Beginnings Church, for making this possible. Thank you.
Candidate Serrano, you have 3 minutes to present an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate everyone coming out this morning. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us. I'm very grateful. I'm going to start out and kind of alongside Nick. I'm grateful for my parents who instilled some tremendous principles in me, not just of community service, but of faith and in making sure that we move forward in the right direction. I'm grateful for a wife and children that are tremendously supportive of me. It's they who have allowed me to really focus my life on giving back to my community. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in Northern California in a small town, little town called Auburn. It's the right Auburn, not the one in Washington, the fake one. But, it was a small town, and we got to know our neighbors. We got to know our community. We really understood the value of working together and serving together. And those principles have been really the foundational bedrock of my life. So when I moved here 10 years ago to work for the Hanford site, after having spent 5, 6, 7 years in the service of my community, building it up through environmental efforts, through building energy projects throughout Northern California, throughout the Port of Houston, I came up here to work for Hanford on a whim because 2 friends from law school called me and said, hey, you got to come up here. We need a good environmental attorney. We know you'll give the agency sound advice. We're dealing with the world's most polluted site, the largest site of the kind in the nation, and we really need some sound advice. And so I spent several years working for the Department of Energy, and then I got an opportunity to jump over to Energy Northwest. And if you don't know what that is, if you've got some gray hairs in the room, you'll remember it as WHOOPS, Washington Public Power Supply. Yeah, I see some nods. And unfortunately, WHOOPS went through some transitions. But at Energy Northwest, we produce the overwhelming amount of power in the state of Washington that's distributed throughout the state. And I had the pleasure of working on small modular reactor technologies, really building a future to harness energy and to clean the environment simultaneously. Those are going to be some of the critical issues. We're going to have an energy and environmental crisis that we're already experiencing on our hands. We need someone who has that knowledge and that baseline to help guide agencies throughout this. In addition, I've had the opportunity to serve as mayor of Pasco and on council for the past 7 years. I've been very blessed, again, through the support of my wife and kids. And I really appreciate getting to know you, and I hope to understand your community, your community's needs, and how I can serve you as your next Attorney General. Thank you.
Give it up for candidate Serrano. Thank you so much. All right, for real this time. Now we're going to dive into the first question. First question is on advancing social justice and equity. How do you see the Attorney General's role in promoting social justice and equity, especially in historically marginalized and underserved communities within the framework of state and federal law?
Where's it going?
First one, let's start off with Serrano.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. I've been at a couple of forums where we've talked about these issues, and again, I'm going to harken back to my time advising the United States and state government of Washington, specifically on environmental issues. We know that traditionally environmental justice comes at the cost of underserved communities, whether they're Black, brown, or other communities that are marginalized. And so my experience of advising state agencies, advising the federal government, and then also suing both on behalf of the people of Washington or on behalf of, in one instance, the people of Iowa, I have a really kind of keen understanding of what it means to provide those measures, especially in the environmental context and the energy context. Again, these are things that I really see as kind of the foreboding issues of our current status in this country. If we don't have enough energy, we're not going to be able to produce what we need to eat, to live, to even watch our TVs. And having worked with marginalized communities to repair those relationships, to build the trust was really critical every time we advanced a project, saying, no, this is a project to clean up your community, to really reinforce it and bring new jobs. I mean, that's going to be another key element, advising the agencies of how to bring great industry that promotes health and welfare as well as economic benefits. Thank you.
90 seconds, Nick Brown.
Well, I think first and foremost is to start with acknowledging the problem that we have around hate and discrimination in our state, both past practices and current practices, which have disproportionately affected communities of color and communities that are living on the margins because of their economic status. And unless we are honest about that problem statement, we cannot address some of the real inequities that we have here in Washington. And so I think everyone, whether it's the Attorney General, the governor, or state representative, city council, everyone who's in a position of authority, who the public who has entrusted, needs to speak up about the problem statement and talk about it honestly and transparently. And as an Attorney General, I think we have to be an advocate for those communities that do not have a voice. When I was the U.S. Attorney, I was honored to be the chair of the Civil Rights Subcommittee for all of the U.S. attorneys in the country, and we met addressing hate and hate crimes. We took that problem very, very seriously, both the prevention and the accountability, regardless of who does that misconduct. And so as Attorney General, it's my commitment to the public to make sure that we do everything in our power to work against that, using the Civil Rights Division to make sure that the policies and the laws that are passed by the Washington legislature are not disproportionately affecting communities of color, and to be that advocate no matter what I'm doing, and to make sure I'm in the community understanding how our policies are impacting us, because I'm just one person with one perspective, and I'll be committed to understanding more from the community.
The next question, we'll start with candidate Brown, and we will transition to the topic of criminal justice reform. What is your position on criminal justice reform, specifically when addressing racial disparities and ensuring fairness for communities within the constraints of the law and prosecutorial authority?
So as I said in my bio, I've spent most of my 22 years as a lawyer in the criminal legal system. I started as an Army defense lawyer representing people who had been accused of crimes. And so I know what it's like to stand next to someone when the government has accused them of doing something wrong. And I was so proud to do that work and so honored to start that work at the beginning of my career, because it gave me a keen understanding of the power of government, how it can be used for good to keep us safe, and how it can be used to harm people. And I think we need to do more to constantly improve our system. How we think about these issues today is vastly different than we thought about it 30 years ago. And we cannot think in a sort of a static. We need to be continuing to evolve in our justice system, find solutions that work, hold people accountable, but give them a chance at redemption. When I was the governor's counsel, I was responsible for overseeing all the clemency and pardon work. So I met with people who had done something wrong, who were trying to do their life better. And I was proud to do that work, because I think everybody at their core is redeemable. And so my job as the Attorney General is to work with the legislature to continually improve our system, whether that's the laws that we use around punishment, whether that's police practices, which is an important area where we need to make sure to build trust and accountability in the law enforcement community. And it is the AG's job to be an advocate in this space, to do everything that we can to do to keep people safe, but to continually improve our system. And I look forward to doing that work.
Follow-up question, candidate Brown. What is the Attorney General's role and responsibility for building trust in the community as it relates to police and police accountability?
You know, absolutely. And a lot of people think of the Attorney General as the chief law enforcement officer for the state. And we are in terms of title. But we actually don't do that much criminal work specifically. Most of the criminal prosecutions work happens at the local level with the county prosecutor, or at the federal level where I used to lead at the Department of Justice. But I think the Attorney General has a leading opportunity to work with the legislature to develop good policy, to make sure that we're holding police accountable when they cause harm, to make sure that we're working with local law enforcement and prosecutors' offices to make sure that we're improving their systems, and to be that advocate. When we see something wrong in the community, we need to make sure that we're being that voice and not simply hiding behind our positions of authority, but being an advocate in that space.
Candidate Serrano, same question. Would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
Can I actually start with that follow-up question?
You can start, and you'll have a few extra moments as well.
Okay. Well, let's start with the community relationship element. And this is one where I do think our current administration is failing us. You know, I've been told that the Ferguson administration presently issues about 1.8 press releases, in other words, almost 2 per week. The problem is I don't see him out in the community. I don't see him advocating for change. I don't see him advocating for even stability of policies. I see it either from a rare press conference that may occur in Seattle, not far from his office, or from the office's pen desk. To your point, to your question, what does the Attorney General need to do to build trust in the community? He needs to be actively engaged in the community. Let's just take, for example, the role of the Attorney General. There are 13 physical offices throughout the state. And they go literally, it's, marks the whole state, all the way from Vancouver to Pullman to Spokane and several up here in this area. The Attorney General needs to be seen with the people, talking to the people, engaging with the people. That's why the overwhelming bulk of what you see, if you follow me on, in particular on X, but on Instagram and Facebook at Serrano for AG, you'll see that I'm out there engaging with people, talking with folks on the street, understanding where they got, how they got here, back to the question of criminal justice reform. Understanding how people got to where they got is going to help us solve so many more pieces of the puzzle than just saying, I came in here, son of a cop, I'll admit this, throw the book at him. Harshest penalty as possible. I'm starting to see that there's so much more needed. One gentleman, the most impactful statement was, this is a homeless guy who had relapsed, meaning he had recovered and relapsed into addiction, and left his wife and kids behind in Montana. And he said to me, just remember, we're hurting. That's why we're here on the streets, found our community here. If you and I, and this isn't me as the Attorney General, this is me as a human, but if we can't work together to build hope and faith and trust, whether it's the homeless community or any other part of the community that feels left behind, it doesn't matter what we put on the books. We actually have to get dirty. We have to get involved, get our hands dirty, get down and serve the people. And that's what we need in an Attorney General, someone who's service-minded towards the people.
So as a follow-up question, what does it mean to serve the people, particularly in the role as Attorney General?
Yeah, I think of it as my role as a father, very similar, right? I love my kids, but I'll spank them, I'll ground them, I'll take away their toys, right? But I also tell them I love them. I think the Attorney General in the service-oriented role needs to be actively involved in advising the legislature as well as advising the agencies, but also needs to be in the trenches with the people. I'm not saying, God forbid, something like North Carolina happens where we have a hurricane. Doesn't mean you have to be cutting trees down and opening roads, but it means understanding. If there's a problem in your community, tell me. If it's violence, if it's drugs, if it's schools, if it's food, if it's energy crisis, I want to know. I want the emails, and let me know so I can work alongside you to solve your particular problems.
Okay, we're going to do this one. Candidate Serrano, you touched on community engagement. I'm going to switch the question a little bit and ask you to touch on police accountability, specifically for you. Given the attorney's role in upholding civil rights, how will you ensure that police accountability and rebuild the trust between law enforcement and communities, particularly in cases of excessive force and racial profiling?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So the Attorney General actually was the one who drafted the most recent use of force policy. Now, I've read it myself, and I'm not sure what it says. There's a lot of ifs, thens, buts, maybes. I've talked with law enforcement. They don't know how to use it. The first thing that has to be done is engage the community, the served community, the policed community, and engage the policing community and say, okay, here's the use of force policy. You don't understand it. I don't understand it. The general public doesn't understand it. How can we work towards understanding where you intend to deploy force? When I got elected to Pasco City Council 7 years ago, we were on the heights of some real police reform there. There was what was called the Antonio Zambrano Montez issue. And this was a gentleman who threw rocks at police and ended up shot. Obviously, that was a strong deployment of force that exceeded the proper use. That was a concern of mine, and let me restate that, because I didn't investigate the case. It appeared so from the eye of the public. The officer was eventually acquitted after further investigation. The problem is, if we have an Attorney General who's advising and no one knows what the advice is, we're never going to get anywhere better. We need to have very clear, coherent standards. And that will, with the city of Pasco, what we did was we worked with the community and we said, what is it that you're looking for? And it started with body-worn cameras, and it started with more training. And those are things that Pasco actually exceeds the required number of hours trained per officer per year that's required by law. And so there are changes that can be made.
Follow-up question to that police accountability. Right now, the governor's office is able to make recommendations for the Attorney General's office to conduct investigations on police misconduct. How do you see your office being able to fulfill that requirement that was started by the People's Initiative under De-Escalate Washington?
Yeah, I think, to your point, I really love the idea of the notion that it's there to investigate. I have concerns with, at one point, there was a full independent office of prosecutions. I'm not sure we want to go fully there. My biggest concern there being that as things change politically, you're going to get a different approach. We need a more consistent basis for the prosecutions. And I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it's partnering with external agencies, whether it's federal or state and local. But as to the opportunity for the AG's office, we would want to make sure that we've got the skilled people, folks who have spent their time in criminal prosecution and defense. I'd want to make sure they're coming from both sides of the coin so they understand what the evidence looks like to present on both sides. So I do think that's an opportunity to really work in tandem with the governor and in tandem with the communities, with folks who will have the ability to review it, again, from both the defense and the prosecution side, because I think that's the best way that we can look and get a holistic approach.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, Attorney Sims asked you about police accountability, so I'm going to switch it as his follow-up. I'm going to switch yours into the community engagement. Community engagement. Communities often feel excluded from policymaking. How do you plan to engage specifically with these communities across Washington state to ensure that their voices are heard and that their concerns are reflected in the actions of the Attorney General's office?
Well, let me first follow up on something, and I don't want to, I know this is not a debate, but I also encourage you to go look at Pete's Twitter account and Instagram account, because what he has been advocating repeatedly is very tough on crime policies. In fact, just yesterday, he was criticizing me for being soft on crime. I've spent most of my life as a criminal justice lawyer. I know what it's like to work with the community and law enforcement, and I also think that the state of Washington should empower the Office of Independent Investigations and create an Office of Independent Prosecutions and give the AGs of the ability to investigate crimes by law enforcement when they've been alleged. That is the way that we build more trust and accountability in the community and increase public safety. But I don't want to sit in the ivory tower in the office in Olympia or Seattle or anywhere else across the state and just pretend to have all the answers. And one of the best things that we can do as a leader is to be engaged in the community, present in the community, not just during election season. And not just the Attorney General. I want to build a culture and an expectation throughout my office that people are participating in their community, that people have access to our office, that we have the most transparent practices that we can. So when we explain the decisions that we're making as Attorney General's office, we explain our victories and we explain our losses. And we make our website accessible and understandable for everyone. Because the way that we get better is that we have that transparency. And I'm also committed to hiring people from all across Washington from diverse backgrounds. I'm so proud of the work that I did on behalf of Governor Inslee to hire the most diverse judges in Washington state history. When I was U.S. Attorney, I continued that practice, and I'm going to do that as Attorney General as well.
Candidate Brown, the next question will be directed to you first, and it specifically deals with consumer protection of vulnerable populations. And what I will ask each of the respective candidates is if you could please define how you see consumer protection or how you define it, and then how will you enforce consumer protection laws to prevent exploitation and discrimination against vulnerable populations, such as low-income families, immigrant populations, and communities of color. Candidate Brown, you answer the question first.
Yes, thank you. The Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office is the area that most people in the public ever interact with or maybe most familiar with. Not every state has a separately elected Attorney General. Some are appointed by the governor, some come into office other ways, but we have a separately elected Attorney General to be the advocate for the people. And that means protecting your rights as a consumer. So if you go to a business and they're using misleading business practices, or they're price gouging, they raise their prices during a crisis, or they're only serving certain communities, that is a violation of Washington state law. And the Attorney General's office is the obligation to bring those cases on behalf of the public. So if we see a company that is doing misleading practices, it is my commitment to investigate and hold those people accountable and to make sure that they're improving people's lives and not damaging people's lives. Part of the reason we have some really difficult economic times now is that we don't pay enough attention to the people in power and companies that are price gouging and harming the public. I think there are new areas that we need to look specifically in the next 4 years and 8 years. First and foremost for me is housing. No matter where I go in this state of Washington, I hear so many concerns about housing affordability, access, and discrimination in housing, whether that's in Seattle or small towns across Washington state. And I want to make sure the AG's office is aggressively involved in the consumer protection issues around housing to make sure that you can rent or buy a home no matter who you are, to make sure there's not price gouging by housing companies and the like.
Candidate Serrano, same question.
Thank you. For me, the consumer protection element of this is the most critical job. Defining it is, this is my opportunity to really advocate on your behalf. Can I get a show of hands of anyone that's never bought anything in here? Okay, I mean, I know it's a rhetorical question, right? Each one of us is a consumer. Each one of us deserves to have a fair opportunity and to have the same price and access to goods. Now, when a business intentionally or unintentionally denies you that service, denies me that service, whether it's based on race, religion, color, creed, or because they just don't like that I'm wearing a pink tie, that's not acceptable. It violates our rights. The Consumer Protection Act is meant to make sure that you and I are on equal footing. Make sure that everyone out there, to your point, whether it's young, old, wealthy, impoverished, immigrant, seventh generation Washingtonian, doesn't matter, that we all have the same access at the same price to the same goods. And that, to me, is the real opportunity for you and I to intersect as your Attorney General, where I can advocate on your behalf. When you call me and say, hey, I'm using the internet for the first time and I just got scammed. Okay, let's figure out who did it. I got pushed into a contract at the door to buy something. I didn't really mean it. I went and toilet paper today is $10 more than it was yesterday. It's my opportunity to jump in and help you.
So as a follow-up, what is the role of the Attorney General in helping to either increase or decrease prices, and use your example of toilet tissue being a certain price? How can the Attorney General impact the price of goods and things like that, just as a follow-up to your statement?
Sure. So the real simple question is whether or not it falls within the right proper pricing element. You know, if someone's escalating prices, obviously there are instances where we've seen prices fluctuate because of inflation or because of shipping from, we buy a lot of our stuff from the East. That's fine. But when someone intentionally gouges the prices, increases the prices, and denies your access to it, the Attorney General can respond to that through punitive measures. Actually, this is a bit of a criminal and quasi-criminal enforcement mechanism. So it's an opportunity once advised. The other thing is to put out really good guidance through the Consumer Protection Act element of the agency of, this is what we see as price gouging, this is where we see it going. We advise you not to do this, otherwise we're likely to take enforcement.
All right, you guys are doing wonderful. How's everyone feeling? You're getting informed? All right, we're gonna keep it going. These are good. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about human trafficking, protecting vulnerable populations. So here's the question. What specific measures will you take to combat human trafficking, particularly in poor and immigrant communities where the individuals are more vulnerable, and to ensure that they receive the protections and the resources that they need? First, let's start it off with candidate Serrano, and then 90 seconds later, Nick Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. And one thing we need to do is understand that our immigrant populations aren't homogenous. I'm on the east side. You can imagine what the influx of my immigrants are. They're either South or Central Americans, and a lot of them are going to work in the fields. A lot of them don't feel like they have a voice. And so the opportunity for the Attorney General to stand on their behalf, understanding where, we talked about the Consumer Protection Act element, there's also labor issues associated with some of our ag areas. So the opportunity to really open up the curtain and understanding whether or not individuals are there voluntarily versus involuntarily, whether or not they're brought by a family member or someone else, understanding how the human trafficking element runs through. That is one of our hot corridors for, again, our Central and South American populations, just because of the access through Tri-Cities up into Yakima and in cutting over to Spokane or over here. Obviously the immigrant population may not be the same over here on the west side. We have a lot of Eastern Bloc ladies. We have a lot of folks that end up, sadly, on Aurora Avenue. We can't have our young girls walking the street and getting sex trafficked. We can't. That's a no. The Attorney General needs to get involved, needs to understand what those people are doing, what their pimps are doing, and really bring them to justice. Work with criminal justice, whether it's Seattle PD, whether it's King County Sheriff or U.S. Attorney, and really throw the hammer down and say, you can't exploit our children.
Thank you. Candidate Brown.
So the problem of human trafficking and the related issues of sex trafficking specifically and labor trafficking relatedly permeates every aspect of Washington. I know that because as U.S. Attorney, I oversaw multiple human trafficking investigations. I know what it's like to hold people accountable who are permeating this very serious problem. And this is happening in communities big and small all across Washington, principally affecting women and young people. And we see those people's rights being violated on a daily basis. And sometimes it's hidden and sometimes it's very public. But it takes experience to bring people to justice for doing that work. And I think I bring a lot of experience to this field because I've overseen indictments, I've overseen grand jury investigations around human trafficking. I know what it's like to do that work. The obligation of the Attorney General is to work collaboratively with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that we are providing state and local resources to federal investigators to get at the heart of this problem, to make sure that we're working with the legislature so they have the right legislative response and the right bills to hold people accountable for doing this, and to bring more awareness to the problem, to use our bully pulpit to make sure that people understand how this happens in their communities, to look for warning signs that we see. There are so many businesses here in Washington that are fronts for human trafficking. The AG's office should be using their power to bring those issues to light and to make sure that we're providing a partnership with all of the enforcement agencies that we have here in Washington.
There's often been conversations and questions asked about mental health, substance abuse as it relates to the criminal justice system. I want to go a different direction, and I want to talk about, and I'm going to ask the very general question, and you can answer how you respond, in terms of what is your platform specific to gun control? And Candidate Brown, if you can go first.
Well, Pete and I, we get along quite well, but we disagree about a lot. And this is the one area where we probably disagree more than anything else. Gun violence in America and in Washington State is one of the principal problems that we have here. And we have such a permeation of guns in our community. And every day we are reading stories about young people in particular that are becoming victims of gun violence or perpetrators of gun violence. And we also have suicide deaths, which is the #1 cause of firearm deaths in Washington and in America. And I firmly believe that the state of Washington should continue on the path that it's been on to develop more gun safety laws. And I've done that work. Some of the proudest work I've done is in private practice, where I help represent the Alliance for Gun Responsibility to write and develop gun safety laws. I've been in court against Pete on these very issues because he has spent much of his career trying to undermine Washington's gun safety laws. He has advocated for making assault weapons completely legal, for expanded magazines completely legal, for advocating for ghost guns to be legal, which are guns that don't have serial numbers. These are all things that make us less safe. We have shown in the last few years how we can improve people's lives. We were the only state in the country to reduce their suicide deaths per capita during the COVID era, in part because we passed things like extreme risk protection orders, which takes people's weapons away temporarily when they're harmed to themselves or others, or through safe storage requirements, which requires people to store their firearms safely. This saves lives, and we need to do more of that effort and defend those laws as the Attorney General.
Candidate Brown, as a follow-up, just to be clear, and Candidate Serrano, I'll ask the same question. Please finish the following sentence. My position on gun control within the state of Washington is?
We need to do everything we can to have better gun safety laws.
Thank you. Candidate Serrano, same question.
Thanks, I'll start there. The individual's right to bear arms should not be infringed. In fact, the U.S. Constitution says shall not. The Washington Constitution says shall not be impaired. Part of the issue we're seeing is a full impairment of law-abiding citizens' rights to clean up a problem that the data is not showing that Mr. Brown's correct. Simply put, these gun control measures aren't saving the lives they're claiming they are. What we need to do is make sure that individuals responsibly own guns. Now, I don't know how to force someone to not commit a crime. If I did, I think I'd be the Attorney General now and we'd be in a crimeless state. The issue that we're seeing is individuals who shouldn't own firearms, who shouldn't possess them because of either criminal background or because they are youth, are owning them and using them and abusing them. I think part of the issue is education. So the Attorney General's office will need to really educate both our legislature and the agencies and the public on what firearm safety looks like. Here's how to use a firearm. Here's when to use it. There's an opportunity to deploy it in self-defense. There's an opportunity to deploy it in safe and fun measures like going at this, if you enjoy shooting, the shooting range. There's nothing wrong with that. What we're lacking is the ability to teach, especially our youth, that violence isn't the solution. These poor kids are inundated with voices from everywhere, social media, at people in the community, school. We need to work better to educate our youth.
And candidate Serrano, just to ensure that there's absolute clarity, if you can complete the following sentence. As candidate for Attorney General, my position on gun control is?
I will not infringe on your rights. I mean, I know that's a very base statement. Gun control needs to be a very measured and calculable to make sure that it protects our communities while protecting your rights. Hopefully that's succinct enough.
Don't sit down, don't sit down, don't sit down, because you get to start off with the last question. Let's keep it on mental health and substance abuse across our state. Communities, black, white, rich, and poor, are all crumbling under this drug crisis. Many face barriers to accessing mental health and substance abuse services. How do you see the Attorney General's office playing a role in ensuring equitable access to these critical services through the enforcement of existing laws or new initiatives?
Yeah, so I think sometimes we couple these two issues. Not all mental health people have substance abuse, and not all substance abuse people substance abuse issues have mental health issues. I think the first thing we need to do is decouple them and treat them individually and separately unless there's a direct intersection. Again, I harken back to the time that I've talked with folks, individuals on the street. Most of those folks weren't mentally ill. They were drug addicts, and they openly admitted that. What happened was when they were 16 or 24 or 22, they got injured. They got injured on a work site. They got injured playing sports in high school. They got prescribed what we know as opioids. Then they got hooked on that, and that turned to fentanyl. Fentanyl's killing our people. We know it's coming up from the borders, ports, north, south, everywhere. We got to work on that. We have to use the Attorney General's office back to the human trafficking. Let's make sure that we're stopping drug trafficking. We're going to make sure that we work with the U.S. attorneys, local jurisdictions, and for anyone that's trafficking drugs, especially fentanyl, that's where we have no pity. You're coming in to kill our community and poison it, full stop. You're not welcome here. You're going to get locked up or go somewhere else. Same thing. Did you know that the childhood endangerment law doesn't call out fentanyl? It calls out crystal meth. We could easily have the legislature change that and make fentanyl introduced to a child a felony. 21-month-old, 18-month-old, they're dying because their parents aren't paying attention. That's where we start. We need to start with really that element of the drug element.
Candidate Brown.
I would agree. I think these are two separate but related issues, and we have massive mental health problems in Washington, like many other states, and drug addiction problems here in Washington. And for the attorney generals on the mental health piece, there are ongoing cases right now that are holding people, the state of Washington, accountable for its inability to solve the mental health problem. With our largest institutions, Western State and Eastern State Hospital, having inundated with patients not being given full access to the rights that they need. We have people who are not getting the competency restoration that they're entitled to by law, We have cases in the state court and federal court that have been languishing for years. And it's my job to come in and make sure that the AG's office is doing everything in its power to support the legislature and the governor's office for reducing that caseload and making sure people are getting the rights that they're entitled to and quickly. I think we're all, one degree of separation from someone who has been suffering from a mental health problem, and whether it's a friend, a neighbor, a family member, a coworker, and we need to treat this like the public health crisis that it is. And we have the same public health crisis when it comes to people suffering from drug addiction. Washington and Oregon have been two of the top states in the country with youth fentanyl overdose deaths. We should not accept that. We should treat it like the crisis that it is. We need to make sure that we're doing the enforcement piece, but getting to the root cause. We're never going to incarcerate and police our way out of people's drug addictions unless we really treat the underlying root cause of addiction. And there's work that the AG's office can do with the legislature and local jurisdiction to treat this problem with the seriousness that it deserves.
As we're running a bit ahead of schedule, we have time for one more short question. And it's going to start with candidate Brown. The Attorney General has historically dealt with issues related to wage theft and fairment of payment for different individuals across the state. What is your position when addressing matters of equal pay specifically for women?
Well, I'll try to give you a short answer to your short question. Wage theft is actually a very pervasive problem, and not a lot of people in the public are familiar with it. But wage theft means people being denied the payment, the wages, the salary that they're entitled to as a matter of law. And we have so many employers and contractors right now where the people do a job and they don't pay the workers what they're entitled to, whether they're working on a job site or working in a company. And for the most part, we treat that as a civil matter. The employer might get fined for not paying their employees what they deserve. But this is happening in the hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars all the time. When you and I, when we see somebody steal something from Target, we all think of that as a crime. But when an employer steals millions of dollars from their employees, we treat it as a civil issue with not the same sort of seriousness. And so we didn't make sure that we are doing everything to bring more equity in this space. And that is acutely felt by women and people of color and immigrant populations, people who are vulnerable populations that employers think that they can take advantage of. And so it is my job to use the AG's office aggressively in this space. One of the things I've talked about as a candidate for a long time now is creating a new division in the AG's office, specifically around wage and worker protections, both to prevent and investigate wage theft and to make sure that we're enforcing safe worker conditions, because so many people are being victimized by their employers, and it is the job of the Attorney General as the advocate for the people to ensure that that does not happen.
Kenneth Serrano.
Thank you. Since we're in the church, I think about the parable of the master who hired the servants, the one at 12 hours, one at 6 hours, 3 hours, and 1 hour, and he paid them the same. And when those who worked longer were frustrated with the master that said, "Why did you pay us the same?" He said, "That was my agreement." We need to make sure, and in this case, obviously, the master gave more. He gave more to those who came at the late hour. In fact, it was the same, but it felt like it was more. When it comes to wage theft, if your employer has an agreement to pay you a certain wage, that wage needs to be met. It shouldn't be paid under the table. Legally, it can't be. And it can't be paid in a manner that subverts the law. That I pay, the folks to my left more and the folks to my right less. Wage theft is a critical issue where we need to be looking out for each one of our populations. As it comes to women, we need to make sure that they're being treated fairly. I can tell you this, in the organization that I run, I founded it. I was the original employee. We have several. We make sure that we pay our people according to what they request, what they need, and what they produce. When it comes down to making sure that it's fair, I have a conversation with each of my employees. I ask them, is this the right wage for you? Is this, we're on a limited budget, is this the right wage? I look forward to overseeing an office of 1,600 employees to make sure each one of them feels like their wage is fair according to their skill set.
Black women in Washington State are still trying to make $1 out of 64 cents. So come on, somebody with the equal pay efforts. Okay. Thank you so much for answering those questions. We're going to change the rule just a little bit. Earlier, I stated that you all would have 90 seconds. This time, since we have a little bit more time, we're going to give you 4 minutes each. 4 minutes. 4 minutes if needed, okay? And so we are going to start with candidate Serrano.
Well, thank you. I can't imagine I'll take all 4 minutes. You've heard a lot of what I have to say. And like I said, you have an opportunity to watch my social medias and see if I'm upholding what I'm saying out there. I believe my message is the same. I understand that while I have, in essence, I've talked about throwing the book at him, and I've talked about learning and growing as a person, trying to understand what that right amalgamation of being a hardcore parent and being a loving parent is. That's what you're going to get when you get me as Attorney General of Washington. The only reason I'm up here is the reason that hurts the most, which is I'm away from my 3 kids right now. They're not going to have a future in Washington. You're not going to have a future in Washington if we continue on the track we're on. This state has so many resources that are getting overlooked, underdeveloped, and bypassed. And I'm not talking just energy, environmental resources. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about the will of Washingtonians. We are a phenomenal state. We can't figure out what we are. In Aberdeen, there's a song, and it was made famous by one of those famous Aberdenians, or however you would call it, Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, "Come As You Are." That's what Washington used to represent. Now it's "Come As I Want You to Be," right? That was the other line of the song. What the government tells us we can and can't be. We need to focus on empowering the people of Washington to be themselves, to treat each other fairly, and to treat each other kindly. As your Attorney General, I assure you this, I will visit those 13 offices, and I will visit your communities in those 13 offices, and I'll visit more communities, because we need to hear from the people. When the legislature is so far out of touch as it currently is, when the administration's out of touch, when the rule makers are out of touch, the advice of the Attorney General can't come from 5th Street in Seattle or Olympia. It's got to come from the people. I'm actively engaged in my community as the mayor of Pasco because I hear my people's concerns. I'm not saying I address them all, because you can't, but we prioritize making sure Pasco is a better place for our people and a safer place for our people. With that same emphasis as your Attorney General, I will serve you graciously, and I will look to earn your trust every way I can to make Washington safer, better, and just the place that we want to raise our kids. Thank you for your time. God bless.
Give it up for candidate Serrano. Nick Brown, 4 minutes if needed.
I will also try not to use the whole 4 minutes. First of all, thank you again to New Beginnings Church for opening up your house of worship to both Pete and I. Thank you to Delta Sigma Theta sorority for all the work that went behind this. Thank you to our moderators. I really appreciate the opportunity. For everyone who came and everyone watching at home, in about 30 days, we're going to be voting on a whole host of things, from the President of the United States, where I hope we elect the first black and the first woman president, the first black woman president of the United States. We're going to be electing a governor, an attorney general, and races all throughout this state. And your participation matters. Your voices matter. So much of the things that we care about, that we think about, that we worry about are decided by people in our city councils, our town halls, and in Olympia, and they're impacting our lives every day. And don't ever think that your participation doesn't count, because everything that you do to participate makes an impact and improves people's lives. And I'm honored to be standing before you to ask for your support to be the next Attorney General for the state of Washington. I think when we're hiring an Attorney General, we're hiring both a lawyer, a leader, and someone who shares our values. And there are big distinctions between Pete and myself on each of those issues. On experience, I think I bring a lot to bear to this job as a lawyer. I've served on both sides of the aisle as a criminal lawyer, defending people and prosecuting people. I've done complex litigation in the civil court, representing companies and governments in private practice. I've argued in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals multiple times. I've done multiple jury trials multiple times. And I've served down in Olympia as the governor's chief legal advisor, trying to help navigate some of the most complex legal and policy issues. I know what it takes to become and serve as the Attorney General because I've worked directly with that office on a myriad of cases over many years. These are all things that my opponent has not done. And these issues and these distinctions matter. And I also know what it's like to lead a large public law firm because I've done it. When I served as U.S. Attorney, I was so honored to be responsible for a staff with jurisdiction from Bellingham to Longview to the Cascades. I know what it's like to come in, to set a vision, to execute on that vision, and represent the community to the best of my ability. And I believe that my values are Washington values. This is where I grew up. I love this state. And I think we have big challenges, but we do a lot of things right. And I know that I will bring those values to bear and represent this state with empathy, with ethics, and with distinction. And I'd be honored by your support in November. Thank you again.
Candidate Nick Brown, thank you all for your attention. Sadia?
I want to say thank you to both of the candidates that are here today. And thank you all for coming out. I want us to take a moment to reflect before we move to the next portion of our event today and reflect on the historical role of the Black church as the heartbeat of the civil rights movement. It has always been a place of worship, but it's also been a place of gathering for social change, a source of hope, a wellspring of strength for our people. When others sought to dismantle our collective power, they targeted our sacred spaces, bombing our churches and taking the innocent lives of 4 little girls. They imprisoned our preachers and silenced our voices in the public square, and yet, in the face of unspeakable violence and unimaginable pain, our church leaders persevered, holding fast to their faith, their mission, their commitment to justice. They refused to be silenced because they knew the church is where we not only find our God, but where we find our community, our resilience, and our purpose. The Black church has always been where we've drawn our strength to fight for what is right, where stories are told, where our movements are born, from the pews to the pulpits, from the streets to our homes. We've always known that the fight for freedom and equality begins right here with us, the church. So as we continue the important work today, let us remember the courage of those who came before us and the sacred legacy we entrusted. Let us honor the memory by standing united, standing strong, and standing together in the pursuit of justice, equality, and true liberation. We are eternally grateful. Thank you to our moderators, Shalice Seacrest and Craig Sims, 2 amazing attorneys and pillars in this community. Thank you to our candidates, Nick Brown and Pete Serrano. I also want to acknowledge the incredible event sponsors, the baddest, the boldest, and the oldest Civil Rights Organization, the State Area Conference of the NAACP, the Seattle Urban League, the National Council of Negro Women, the Young Professionals, the National Panhellenic Council, Stand By Your Children, and my beloved Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, with representation from Seattle, Bellevue, and the chapter where I have the honor of serving as the Vice President, Tacoma Alumni. I want to thank you for coming out on this Saturday, and we want to hear from these 2 men who want your votes. As you leave today, I want to remind you that your voice and your vote matters. So we're going to take a moment to transition and allow our candidates to have a wonderful day and for our moderators to leave the stage as well. Thank you both for coming. And so to host the next portion of today's event, we have Michelle Merriweather. After a successful career in marketing for major organizations, she chose to follow her passion, advocating for African Americans and underserved communities. She serves as the 13th president of the Urban League of the Metropolitan Seattle. She takes an active role in impacting her community. She serves on the boards of the Alliance for Education. I also want you to tell me, she didn't want me to read this to y'all, but we need to know who she is. She also serves on the board of KUOW, United Way of King County, Multicare Behavioral Health Foundation, the Downtown Seattle Association, and the inaugural appointee of the first Washington State Women's Commission dedicated to shaping policy that directly impacts women that call Washington home. She is a proud graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana, the nation's only historically Black Catholic university. She has numerous awards and accolades, but I am so proud to call her my soror as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Merriweather.
Every time I hear that, I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. It means nothing. It means I work a lot and that I love my people and my community and I'm here to serve. So for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I'm grateful to see all your beautiful faces today. I know you have a lot of things that you can do on a Saturday morning, but nothing is more important to hear than hear from candidates that want to represent you in Olympia. This is truly, everybody says it, but this is truly one of the most important elections of our time. So it is so important that we exercise that right and make sure that those that we love and care about exercise that right as well and be informed voters all up and down the ballot. Yes, we have the opportunity to put the first Black woman into the White House. Yes, we have important things and decisions to make nationally, but local elections matter. Local elections matter on the things that we do each and every day. So thank you for being here to listen to those candidates, but we're also going to talk about and hear from folks that want to that currently and want to represent us locally as well. The House of Representatives in the lower chamber of the Washington State Legislature is the lower chamber of the Washington State Legislature. Alongside the Washington State Senate, it forms the legislative branch of the Washington state government and works alongside the governor of Washington to create laws and establish a state budget. Y'all remember Schoolhouse Rock? Some of y'all do. I wish we still had it because some of our community needs to be informed. I just wish we, I want to just take the videos on YouTube and just push them out to the masses. As I read this, I think about that. Because that's where I learned how legislation works before civics class. Legislative authority and responsibilities of the Washington House of Representatives includes passing bills on public policy matters, setting levels for state spending, raising and lowering taxes, and voting to uphold or override gubernatorial vetoes. So a lot of the things that matter to us each and every day, these folks take our voice to Olympia and make change. All 98 seats in the Washington House of Representatives are up for election in 2024. Today, we invited every single state representative candidate from the 30th, 33rd, and 47th to come and speak with you today. Candidates in the 30th, Melissa Hamilton had a conflict but does have information outside. Mia Su Ling Gregerson of the 33rd also had a prior engagement. Pay attention to those who show up to speak to you and address you and answer your questions. And also just reply to say that they can't make it. That matters, right? So the candidates that are here and said yes to addressing you today are Representative Jamila Taylor, Representative Deborah Enterman, and Representative Chris Stearns. And I invite them each to address you today. They have 5 minutes to share their platform. And so with that, I will invite Representative Jamila Taylor to come first, followed by Representative Enterman, and then Representative Stearns.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This election this year is an important time for all of us, especially in South King County. My name is Representative Jamila Taylor out of the 30th District, and I thank, in particular, Sadia Abdullah for inviting me to speak with you today. I've been here in this building listening to the challenges that are facing us every single day. I was here last when we heard about Project 2025 and how that would impact us nationally. Even if Donald Trump does not get elected in the presidency, which we do not want, Project 2025 and their supporters are active in our state. They are active in trying to ensure that those values are implemented in the State House, implemented in Washington State. I am here with my colleagues to tell you that we will fight back against Project 2025 and all those values that are really rooted in our destruction, rooted in our exclusion, rooted in ways that want to push us back. We're not going back. I currently serve as the Civil Rights and Judiciary Chair. I serve on the Housing Committee, and I serve on the Human Services, Youth, and Early Learning Committee. So those are three committees that are front-facing and dealing with everyday lives of people. In the work that I do as an attorney, a family law attorney, I see the intersectionality of the challenges everyday people are facing, from substance use, mental health, and especially in family law that's high conflict, child support, child care day issues, employment, conflicts within the family, making sure our young people have access to the resources that they need. When we invest in our people, we are investing in our communities. We have stable communities. I want to make sure that I come back and think about and put into policy how we can rectify the past, that reparative justice that we all need. As you may have heard, the Covenant Homeownership Act was a bill that I sponsored and worked in partnership with community and my colleagues in the legislature to ensure that we address the harms of racially restrictive covenants by providing down payment assistance to those black people first, who have been subjected to those harms. And that bill is being enacted right now, and people are getting down payment ranging from $20,000 to $150,000 so they can meaningfully get into home ownership in King County and beyond. Seeing how we are trying to address the harms of the war on drugs in our communities, I want to advocate and continue to advocate for the resources, the $200 million that was put in and invested into the Community Reinvestment Program. We're in the first round of funding on that. We must fight to protect that funding and ensure that it is instilled in our budget for years and years to come. $200 million is going to be recycled into the community in $1.5 billion of investment back in us, back in community, reparative justice at work. This doesn't work if you're not rooted in community. Every time I hear someone say the legislature is not involved and doesn't know what community needs, when I see my colleagues who are tirelessly sacrificing time with family, sacrificing job opportunities to be in community, to do this work, it is relentless because the need is that great. I want to continue that effort on behalf of this community, the understanding the intersectionalities of all of the challenges that we have. I'm a daughter of a mother and a brother who both have ongoing chronic health issues. Imagine trying to make sure that you have the resources you need to pay for your insulin. Bring those down. When you're having to decide between your housing and your medicine, those are both human rights. You shouldn't have to compete for that. When we are here working together, listening to the people, and the people are showing up and making sure that you are accountable to them, that is community in action. And I want to continue to do that work on your behalf and in partnership with my colleagues who are here today and those who are not, to ensure that we are bringing your voice into spaces where we have been excluded for so many generations. And I'm honored for your time today. Thank you. Representative Jamila Taylor, 30th District.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Entenman. I'm going to adjust this just a little, maybe. So I can't see you, but I know you can hear me. My name is Deborah Entenman. I am with the 47th Legislative District, and I have had the opportunity to represent the community of parts of Kent, all of Covington, and Auburn for the last 7 years. It'll be 8 if I am reelected in November. I came to this Kent community after growing up in Seattle. Like many of you, I lived in Seattle and thought that that would be where I raised my children, but as the housing prices increased, I knew that I needed to move someplace else so that we could have a larger piece of property and still maintain our relationships with our community. Thank you very much. So I ran for office almost 8 years ago because we had a person who was representing community who said that we did not need to have a piece of legislation called breakfast after the bell. Breakfast after the bell was just simply saying that if a school had a community, if community, had a school that more than 60% of their children qualified for free and reduced price lunch, every kid should just have breakfast after the bell. So you didn't have to come early to get your breakfast. You could come into school, do attendance, you go have breakfast. Everybody in the school has breakfast, and there was no stigma around being a hungry child. The work that I have done, I have continued to do to end what we call food insecurity. It is to end hunger in our schools. I have the opportunity now to be the vice chair of post-secondary education and workforce development. That means I'm the vice chair of higher ed. I'm also on the transportation committee. I'm on the civil rights and judiciary committee with Representative Taylor, and I'm also on the housing committee. I'm one of few people who has 4 committees in the legislature. But the work that I am most proud of, and there was a discussion about it earlier today, was a bill that created an Office of Independent Investigation. The Office of Independent Investigation was put in place because of the extrajudicial killings that were happening in Washington state, which basically means police were killing people before they got to court, and we were able to determine their guilt or innocence. We need to stop that. We are trying to do that by saying we simply will not allow you to shoot someone and then investigate yourself. So an independent investigation is just that. If a police department is involved in a shooting, there is an independent group of people who will come along with training to investigate that incident. We are hoping that that will lead to more prosecutions. Now, I want to tell you about the Office of Independent Prosecution. It does not exist yet. It does not exist yet, but it will exist, and I will tell you why. Once you have all the evidence from the Office of Independent Investigations, you won't be able to do anything except for create an Office of Independent Prosecutions if you believe in fairness, if you believe in civil rights. So with time, our Office of Independent Prosecutions will come. We had to create a number of things over time in our legislature. And some people in community think we're taking too long. When I first got to the legislature, we created the first Legislative Black Caucus. It was 4 members. If everything goes as planned in this next election, we will have 13 members of the Legislative Black Caucus. That is one of the things I am most proud of. I think it's important for community members to understand that we cannot do everything, but the things that we are trying to do, we are trying to do with our communities in mind. It is helpful for you to reach out to us, ask us questions, spend time on boards and commissions that the governor says we have openings on. No, you don't get paid, but there is a stipend for travel and the time that you spend. But what's most important is that you have a voice. I'm being told that my time is up. I just want to say, please vote in the next election. Please encourage others who are not going to vote or say they don't know what to vote for to participate as well. You can reach out to the sorority, other community members, your churches, your Rotary groups. We need everyone to vote in the next election. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Chris Stearns, and I'm a representative, and I'm very proud to say I serve alongside my seatmate, Representative Deborah Entenman, who we really need back in the House, and also I'm proud to serve alongside Chair Jamila Taylor. I'm in the 47th District. I want to thank Sadia, but I also really, man, you said Schoolhouse Rock, and I've got the Schoolhouse Rock t-shirt on supporting our favorite next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. So I live in Auburn. My family, we all have lived there. Our two daughters graduated from Auburn High, and I also had the honor to serve on the Auburn City Council before I got to the legislature. And the reason I was just so honored to have the chance to run is because it really goes to my background. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I'm Navajo. My mom was a Navajo teenage girl in the 60s, and she was part of a federal program to assimilate Native Americans, to really just end our culture. And so that program was called Federal Relocation. And so my mom got relocated from a little tiny Navajo village in Arizona, and New Mexico is where it straddles. And she got sent to Los Angeles. And so as a single teenage girl, she tried to make a new life in LA. I was born when she was 17. She really was not able to handle me. I mean, to be honest, few can. Ask my wife, my parents. So I was put up for adoption on the day I was born, and I spent the first few years of my life in the Los Angeles County foster care system. So, I feel just so lucky even to be here. I mean, it's incredible that I've had these opportunities in my life. And the thing is, I didn't do it myself. I am so lucky to be here, and my whole goal in life has been, to give back. I was able to go to law school, and I was able to use that degree to represent my own tribe, to help schools on my reservation, to help kids get food and funding for places to live. And so I just think every day that I'm here walking and breathing, that I have a chance to help people live better lives. I'm so grateful to do that. My political heroes are the Kennedys. And John F. Kennedy said, the true measure of a nation is its success in fulfilling the promise of a better life for each of its members. And that's what we're here to do. I've been able to use my limited short time. I'm a freshman, although hopefully I'll be reelected. I'll get a chance to work on some more things. But I've been able to bring over $1 million for a new opioid treatment center to be operated on Vashon Island. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud to have worked alongside Deborah Entenman to help bring things like, she's on transportation, new highways for our district. We need that. I got over $500,000 for the state to look at cold cases for missing and murdered Indigenous women and to do DNA and forensic testing to identify their remains so we can bring closure to that crisis. And the bill that I didn't get done, but I'm really excited to bring back, is to recalculate the prison sentences for people who committed crimes but had extra long sentences because they also committed crimes as a juvenile. We already made the decision to end that practice going forward, but we didn't finish the job. We did not go back and look at the prisoners who are already serving time. And it turns out that over a third of them are Native Americans. So we can do better, and I'm going to work to make sure that we do. So I will leave it there, but I just want to thank you so much for coming out. It means the world to see you today, and I'm grateful to have this chance. I'm asking for your vote in, just a little bit to re-elect me back to the House of Representatives. Thank you so much.
So I know I thanked our sponsors, but there are two people in particular, my soror Cheryl Boyd and my soror Michelle Merriweather. I said, I need, and they said, okay. Didn't even finish the statement, so that's just how Deltas roll. But as you all leave here today, I want to remind you that every voice matters. Your vote counts. Elections have consequences that touch every aspect of our lives, our jobs, our schools, our families, and our futures. But remember, not voting is a vote. That gives away your power. It gives away your choice. As members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, we believe in moving forward with fortitude. Fortitude is about resilience, about courage, about standing up for what is right. And when the path is difficult, we keep moving forward. That same fortitude is needed now as we approach this election. Our country is as divided as ever, but we must move forward together, taking our communities with us. Now, it wouldn't be a Delta social action event if I didn't leave you with a charge or marching orders. Reach out to our young people. Talk to them about the importance of this moment. Encourage them to be a part of shaping the future that they want to live in. Their voices matter just as much as anyone else. Their decisions today impact generations to come. Tell them your vote is your voice, and we need you at the table. So let's move forward with purpose. Let's honor those who fought and sacrificed for our right to vote by showing up at the ballot boxes in full force. We've done it before, and we can do it again, because that's who we are. We are change makers, committed to justice. Thank you, and please go vote.